Good morning. We will do creditors reconciliation again today. The following account appeared in the creditors ledger of ABC Traders. So that means if it's in the creditors ledger, they treat Olivetti wholesalers as a creditor, so they are buying from them. So when they want to increase the account, they will increase it on the credit side. And when they want to show that they owe less money to Olivetti wholesalers, they will record it on the debit side. If we look at the month statement that we receive from Olivetti wholesalers, you will see that they will treat the ABC Traders as a debtor because they sell goods to them. So that means they will increase the debt on the debit side and they will decrease it on the credit side. Now, the first entries that we'll have to do is to determine where mistakes were made. So if I look at the balance, the opening balance for both of them were 2,500. Then in the creditors ledger, we showed that we paid 2,000 Rand. In their books, they also show the 2,000 Rand. But what do we see? They've got an additional 500 Rand that's not in the books here. So it means that one of the two made a mistake. So we will have to read to see where the mistake was made. Okay, then we see in the creditors ledger, there's a 5,600 and there's a 5,600 there on the debit side. Okay, what do we see now? Here's 182 on the debit side, and here's also 182 on the debit side. And what do we know? The one is a creditor, the other one treats the account as a debtor, so it can never be on the same side. So there's a mistake again. So we've discovered a second mistake. The first mistake was the 500 that's here, that is not on Olivetti's wholesaler's account in the creditors ledger. Then the 182 is on the same side. Then we see there's an entry for 3230, and what do we see here? The 3230 is again on the same side. So it's the same entry, but there's a mistake because we've put the 3230 both times on the same side. So with the 182, both accounts have the 182, but they're on the same side. So that means there's a mistake. Both accounts have the 3230, so that means there's also a mistake. And then if we look in the rest of the account, there are 3 additional entries in the creditors ledger that's not recorded in the statement. So we will have to determine where these mistakes were made. Then they give me additional information so that I can determine where all the mistakes were made. But before we start with the additional information, we must start our creditors ledger with a balance that we ended here. And the creditors ledger has a balance of 558. And we will start the creditors reconciliation statement with a balance that they ended their account 15,712. So when we go to the creditors ledger, we will show that the closing balance at the end of the month was 558. And when we start the creditors reconciliation statement, we will show that the closing balance was 15,712. Olivetti wholesalers treated credit note 52 as an invoice. Okay, now we see that the mistake was made by Olivetti wholesalers. What did they do? They treated a credit note as an invoice. That means if we look at invoice 52, because they think they sold goods, they showed it here on the debit side. This was actually supposed to be a credit note. So this amount should be on the credit side. So this is an incorrect entry that will have to be corrected on the credit side. So if we go to the creditor's reconciliation statement, we will see that this amount is put on the credit side twice. Why is it recorded twice on the credit side? First of all, to correct the mistake of 182 that was put on the debit side, and then the original entry was supposed to go on the credit side, so you have to record the 182 again on the credit side so that you can show that this account was reduced with the 182 correction of error and with the 182 that was supposed to go on the credit side. If we look at the additional information number 2, although ABC Traders received the merchandise purchase, no entry for invoice 209 was made. Okay, so if we look at the invoice 209, we see here on the monthly statement received from Olivetti Wholesalers that there's an invoice 209. This invoice did not appear in the creditor's ledger. Now they say they received these goods, but invoice 209 was not recorded. So the business made a mistake not recording it. So we will enter it in the creditor's ledger. And I will show that in the creditor's ledger, the creditors increase on the credit side, decrease on the debit side. So if there's an invoice, it means that goods were bought and the debt must increase. That's why I will put the 6,700 on the credit side and I will add it to the 558 to determine what is the new balance, 7258. Invoice number 206 was received from Olympic Wholesalers. Okay, so if we go to the creditor's ledger, we see that there's an invoice 206 for 1870. That invoice is not on the monthly statement. Now, in the additional information, they tell us that this invoice was received from Olympic Wholesalers. We are busy with the books of Olivetti Wholesalers. So the business made a mistake recording this 1867 in the books where it was not supposed to go. So this 1870 is incorrect. This should be in the books of Olympic Wholesalers. So that means it will have to be corrected in the creditor's ledger. So if we go to the creditor's ledger, you will see that we will record that 1870 on the debit side. Because the mistake was made on the credit side, we have to take it out of the credit side now and put it onto the debit side to reduce the effect of that transaction. If we put something in the creditor's ledger on the debit side, it will reduce the debt. So we will subtract the 1870 from the 7258 and we will get the new balance as 5388. ABC Traders issued invoice 523 and it was treated as a credit note. Okay, again, who made the mistake? The invoice was treated as a credit note by ABC Traders. So the mistake was made in the books of ABC Traders. So because the mistake was made in the books of ABC Traders, it will have to be corrected in the creditor's ledger. The invoice 523 was for 3,230 Rand. They treated it as a credit note, so it means that they recorded it on the debit side of the creditor's ledger. it is supposed to be an invoice, so it's supposed to go on the credit side. So I have to go and correct it twice on the credit side. Once to correct this mistake that I made, so I will put it on the credit side, 3230, to cancel out the entry on the debit side. And then it was supposed to go on the credit side, so I will put it a second time on the credit side so that I can show that the invoice actually supposed to increase the debt. So the debt will now increase to 11,848. According to the credit terms of Olivetti Wholesalers, 20% discount is allowed if the account is paid within 30 days. Okay, if we go back to our entries now, we're going to see who made the mistake with the discount. If we look here, in the books of Olivetti ABC Traders, for Olivetti Wholesalers, when they paid the check, they recorded this 2,000. And Olivetti Wholesalers also recorded the 2,000. What happened in the books of ABC Traders? They never recorded the discount. But in the books of Olivetti Wholesalers, they entered the 500 Rand discount. So Olivetti Wholesalers account here must reduce with 500 because ABC Traders never recorded that 500. So it will be corrected in the creditors ledger, and we will show that the check will reduce the outstanding debt with 500 Rand, and then we see what is our new balance is 11,348. Okay, according to the credit terms, you will receive 20% discount. So we have to go back again and see if there's any more entries that will be affected by that 20% discount. Okay, so if we look at the creditors ledger, we see that there's two entries here that doesn't appear in the books of Olivetti Wholesalers. The 3,200 and the 800 is not here. Now, if we look at the dates, on which date was these checks issued? On the 28th. When did Olivetti Wholesalers end their statement of account? On the 19th. So it means that when they recorded the statement of account, they haven't received those checks. So as soon as they receive the checks, they will record the 3,200 and the 800. So we will show in the creditors reconciliation statement that Olivetti Wholesalers will record the 3,200 and the 800 in the future. So we will go and show there that the amount will be reduced with the 3,200 and 800 because in the creditors reconciliation we do the work as Olivetti Wholesalers will do it. They treat it as a debtor, so it increases on the debit side, decrease on the credit side. Because they didn't show this payment and they didn't show the discount, it means that the debt will be reduced. Now, if we look at the creditors ledger, the closing balance is 11,348, and in the creditors reconciliation, it is also 11,348. So it means that we corrected all the mistakes. So what did we learn today? Although additional information is given, you must always record the entries that was not given as well. So for the additional information, you will go and do all the corrections or the omissions. Then, for instance, for the check that was given at the end of the month, although they don't give us any additional information, you must go and look at the dates and you must realize that that means that they still have to record these two entries, so you will have to go and record it even if nothing was said about this entry.